Welcome, ladies and gents, my name is Curci, and I am well aware that I have already made a top 10 best games of 2014, but I wanted to recognize a lot of the other games that have done really good because there are certain things that they did the best of, but it just wasn't enough to make the top 10 list. I played a total of 17 games this year, only 4 of them I actually consider to be bad, and if you want to know what they are, there they are. All 4. So I have broken up different categories. Who was the best playable character? Who had the best story? Who had the best soundtrack? Who had the best multiplayer? Because I want to recognize the best of this year. Maybe it wasn't the best considered like the best total overall games. But still, if you did really well in a certain category, you deserve to be given recognition for that. So basically, this is my version of the Video Game Awards, which is basically what this video is going to be called. It's Rick's Video Game Awards of 2014. Again, this is all my opinion, just like with the top 10 list. You may agree with it, you may not. You can comment below. You can tell me if you agree with it. I like debating. But I digress. So let's just get into this. Let's go into our first category, Best Protagonist. I feel like your protagonist, your main character, your playable character is the single most important character. This is the one character you have to get right because they will be the one who will be the center of every cutscene, the person that I am playing from the same perspective. So basically, this is me. You need to make sure that this character is interesting because if your playable character isn't, you check out. When I was judging this category, I was judging them on the fact of how well voiced, how well written were these characters, how much did they impact the story, were they actually interesting people, did they have any real character development, and also how did they handle the actual gameplay? Did they feel like a badass? Not everybody's gonna be a guy, but you can still be a badass by having multiple decisions and basically the gameplay being dialogue. So without further ado, here are the nominees for Best Protagonist.
I was their most devoted warrior. A champion of light. But I fell into darkness. And now, I am feared as the Prince of Darkness. Ironic, don't you think?
The Inquisition requires a leader. The one who has already been leading it. You.
You think my job is easy? You try keeping a bunch of fables from killing each other. How do you think this all works?
I don't know. How?
By being big and being bad.
I had a family once. A wife. And a son. And I buried them along with everyone I ever knew.
Stay with us. My mother can help you.
I can't. I don't belong here.
And the winner is Bigby Wolf for The Wolf Among Us. I was really unsure who I was going to go with in this because I really like all of them. I feel like Dracula was really godlike in the gameplay. He was just so formidable. The gameplay was one of my most favorite things about that game, but here's the thing about the character is I felt like he had no real character development. I thought he was voiced well enough, but it was just the writing. He felt very mopey, and he stayed that way throughout the entire game. For the same exact reasons, Talion, who was really badass in the gameplay, he was in enemy territory and built an army out of enemy forces. But again, he has full reason to be very mopey, but he's still very mopey, and then that's him the entire game. There's no character development, there was no real payoff. I thought Troy Baker did a good job with what he was given. The writing was just not there. So for the exact same reasons, I had to pull out Dracula and Talion. So that leaves us with the Inquisitor, and it leaves us with Bigby Wolf, and what really came down to it is that these two guys are really kind of the same. Not really in terms of their positions, because one is a detective and the other one is like a leader of armies, but in my opinion, I felt that Bigby Wolf had more impact. You could play certain ways and it would make sense. Bigby Wolf is based off the fairy tale character of the Big Bad Wolf, who's the villain in most of his stories. He's a dude that eats Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. He's the same dude that blows down the houses of the 3 little pigs. Dude's a jerk, and a lot of people recognize that. But you could play the game differently. You could embrace that. You can make the people of Fabletown fear you as the Big Bad Wolf, who is a badass and a jerk. Or you could be the guy who's on a redemption story, where he's like, I don't want to be the Big Bad Wolf anymore. I just want to be me. I don't want people to fear me anymore. I just want to be a good detective and help everybody out. It made sense to choose either good or bad, and it was characteristically believable. Dragon Age Inquisition didn't give me that freedom. I felt that even if I made the asshole decision, the game still twisted it to be the good guy. But what I mean when I say it characteristically makes sense is that when you look at The Walking Dead Season 2, I feel like when Clementine acts like an asshole, because Clementine is the playable character, it's uncharacteristic of her when she's being a jerk, because you play the entirety of Season 1 protecting and sheltering this innocent little girl, and it's hard to picture that innocent little girl to be created into a monster. But I feel like The Wolf Among Us did a really good job of establishing the fence, and no matter what side you ended on, it made sense. I feel like he had really good depth, he had really good writing, was really well voiced, and also, he was a badass. He could get shot a million times, he has multiple forms. Bigby Wolf is, in my opinion, your best protagonist of 2014. So let's move on to our next category. Let's move on to best story. I really like a good story. It's one of the things that I really look forward to in a game. It gives me the motivation to be doing, like, what am I doing right now? Oh, I'm doing it for this reason. Good games will have twists and turns, big plot points, and big pivotal moments where everything comes together. Is story the most important thing in gaming? No, because here's an example of some games that really had really good gameplay, but very stories. And those games I thought were really good, but story is still something that really shines for me. So here are the nominees for best story.
For what had once been Gabriel Belmont was now a powerful vampire known as Dracula, the Dragon. The Brotherhood of Light fought against the onslaught of his dark armies, which laid waste to towns and villages across the land, but to little avail.
Ajigali. My name is Saban. I'm with the Golden Path.
Golden Path?
We're friends. I knew your father. We're here to rescue you, son-in-law.
So, who found her?
I did. She was just like this. I didn't touch her. I grabbed Grimble's jacket to cover her with. Then, I came to get you right away.
No one else was with you?
No. Big P, did one of us do this?
There hasn't been a murder in Fabletown in a long time.
We call it the Breach. It's a massive rift into the world of demons that grows larger with each passing hour. It's not the only such rift, just the largest. All were caused by the explosion at the Conclave.
An explosion can do that.
This one did. Unless we act, the breach may grow until it swallows the world.
And the winner is Dragon Age Inquisition. Dragon Age Inquisition, for a lot of reasons, I felt that the stakes were really high. I'm not trying to dismiss what the other games have done, but it really honestly came down to two games. It came down to Dragon Age Inquisition and Far Cry 4. But the stakes in Far Cry 4 were nowhere near as high as they were with Dragon Age Inquisition. Not to mention the playable character is also something that really adds to that story. Because again, I am playing from that perspective. My point of view is coming from the playable character, and I really felt that AJ Gale was not really all that believable. He was so ready just to throw away whatever life that he had just to fully commit himself to whatever was happening in the land of Kyrat. But the Inquisitor has motivation to do what he's doing. He has that reason to be here. I thought the villain in Inquisition was really good. I thought the story was really good, and it has that twist that really shifts things to make it interesting and fresh. It felt like I was in the middle of fighting a war. I was leading one of the armies fighting against this villain. Not to mention each individual zone had its own individual story. It doesn't really, like, it feeds into the main plot, but it's not really contingent on playing this to get a whole perspective on what the main plot is about. But still, the story element in Dragon Age Inquisition is so strong. It is so good. So your best story for 2014 goes to Dragon Age Inquisition. Now we move on to our next category, which is best soundtrack. The soundtrack and score of a game is one of the most important things to me because it really can either get me really pumped up, it can make you feel a certain way. There are some moments you can look at a video game, see a moment, and it'd be like, you're on the verge of tears. But take away the music and you feel like the impact does not happen as much as it did when the music was there. Music is such a brilliant form of art because it helps you feel. It makes these moments even better. With that said, here are the nominees for Best Soundtrack.
The king, the mighty king, he helps us when he helps us sing. Jesus come from gutters and pit and we fight back again.
A small party of goblins coming from the castle!
We slash, we smash, we slay. Goblins, ghouls, stay away. In the earth we spill their blood.
At the castle! Fire!
And the winner is Dragon Age Inquisition. I really almost gave it to Lords of Shadow 2. The big negative of playing a game that happens early in the year than playing a game that happens at the end of the year is because you remember the game a little bit better when it came out at the end of the year than when it came out in February. But then I started looking at old Lords of Shadow 2 footage and I was like, the music was really good. When I look at the soundtrack, it's not just about how epic it sounded, it's how properly placed it was. Destiny had really good music. It had really epic sounding music, but I feel like it was improperly placed. You're in the middle of a gunfight that is the exact same thing as every other gunfight in this game, and it's all like, I mean, that sounds cool, but why now? I feel like Lords of Shadow 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition did a fantastic job of having your music perfectly timed. It's not just about the epic music, but it's the slower music as well. Sunset Overdrive was on this list just because of how catchy it was. The king, the mighty king, da 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 da. Catchy is cool, but it just doesn't really hold a candle to what these other two games have done. I was editing a video the other day. It was actually my Dragon Age Inquisition review. I was whistling the menu music of Lords of Shadow 2. Here's the one single reason why I decided to go with Inquisition than Lords of Shadow 2. Because Lords of Shadow 2 was really good, but it didn't send chills down my spine. There was a moment in Dragon Age Inquisition, it wasn't even at the end of the game, it was like when the things really started to kick off. The moment was right, they cued the music picked up, it got epic, the moment picked up and got epic at the exact same time, and boom, chills. When you get that effect from me when it comes to music, you get my seal of approval. So that is why Dragon Age Inquisition has your best soundtrack of 2014. So let's start talking about the actual gameplay. The thing that you do most of the time in video games. Let's get into who had the best single player. So now we're going to put more focus on the actual single player experience, which is basically the gameplay. This is the combat. These are the decisions that you have to make. The one that I just had the most fun out of. So here are the nominees for best single player.
Enjoyed dying so much you want to do it again, eh? No problem.
Come back to our base. I might be able to figure out a way to track it down.
Okay, cool. I'm on my way. Wait, how do we communicate with Sam when neither of us is holding a phone?
Let's not complicate things by poking holes in the way we deliver the story, okay?
Oh, okay then. I'm gonna go back to the base and be magically gone by the time you have control.
Fine by me. That's not weird at all.
And your winner is Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. As fun and humorous as Sunset Overdrive is, and how immersive and big that Far Cry 4 and Dragon Age Inquisition are, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor was the only game to present something that I've never experienced before. Because of the Nemesis system, I was having in-depth stories and rivalries with NPC characters, creating a better story than what the game's main plot was, in my opinion. The combat was flawless. It was so smooth. It looked awesome. It looked cool. I was so immersed into this world that even I understood that there weren't a lot of things to do in this game, but what was there, I was totally happy with it. It was a standout single player experience. So Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor will take the award for best single player of 2014. So we talk about the single player, let's get into who had the best multiplayer. Playing with other people online, playing with friends, which one had the most enjoyable, most replayable gameplay? It needs no introduction, it's multiplayer. It's the thing that a lot of people play most of. Some people pick up games, they don't even play the single player, they just play for the multiplayer. Some games recognize that and put the focus on multiplayer. Games like World of Warcraft are centered around its multiplayer experience. Behemoths like that game. So, out of 2014, here are your nominees for best multiplayer.
Militia interference. Stand by. Performing analysis of the tower system.
We now control Hardpoint Bravo.
An enemy pilot is attacking you.
There you are. You're mine now.
And the winner is Titanfall. And I'll tell you why. Let's go over Destiny first. Destiny was a game that had a very cool multiplayer. Destiny was an all multiplayer game, but it fed into a competitive thing as well. And then there were also the raids, and the raids were very highly cooperative, but the problem was the game just wasn't fun. Bungie, in my opinion, was... If I had a category for worst developer, I would give it to Bungie. Because Bungie is a company that just does not listen to its fan base. People have been crying out for a matchmaking for the raids just so people can experience them. Because I personally don't know 5 other people that own an Xbox One, let alone own a copy of Destiny on an Xbox One. In addition to that, I'm one of the people that really doesn't like to play with random people. Whenever I jump into a game of Titanfall, I will mute everybody. The only people on my friends list are people I have met in real life. Co-workers, people I've gone to school with, family members. But the fact that there is no matchmaking to even give me that option is annoying. Not to mention that the game is just really super repetitive. And honestly, for that same reason of repetitiveness, Sunset Overdrive was fun and enjoyable, especially when you play with friends, because Destiny was also really enjoyable when you play with friends. I feel like Sunset Overdrive offered what it offered, then it kind of plateaued. I didn't play all that much of Far Cry 4's cooperative mode. That's the only reason why I didn't make this list. I touched it just to be like, oh, all right, well, there it was. Like, I feel like it made sense for it to be nominated, but I just didn't play enough of it to feel comfortable nominating it. And then there was Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs was the game that I felt was, its multiplayer was actually one of the more enjoyable things about the game. You could jump and invade into other people's games and try to steal their data, which forces the other player, the person who's being invaded, to start hacking into things to try and find the hacker. But what was really cool was that when I was playing Watch Dogs is that you can act like an NPC. There was one time where it was actually in a Let's Play I released of Watch Dogs. I hacked into this guy's phone and then I hid in traffic as the guy ran around trying to find me. But in my opinion, it was cool, but it just wasn't enough. But Titanfall, for all of its repetitiveness, was just, it was so good. It was so in-depth. Playing as a pilot, very fast-paced and running on buildings and stuff, it was just so good. And then there's the Titan. You play it very differently than the way you play as a pilot. You're not running on walls anymore. Now you're very upfront and in the action. The game had so much depth. It had really well-designed maps. It had awesome game modes. And on top of that, the developer adds in so much more to the game to keep it updated with fresh new stuff. If I had a category for best shooter, it would win that category as well. But in my opinion, I felt that there was so much depth with Titanfall's gameplay that you play differently when you played as a pilot or when you played as a Titan. And it was so properly balanced. You could play as a pilot, 1v1 a Titan, and still take it out. It was so good. It was just a really well-made first-person shooter. It had so much depth to it. I spent so much time into it for a reason. I completely understand why a lot of people really don't like the fact that the game was at a time repetitive, but you shouldn't play the game with like weeks and weeks and weeks of gameplay. It's just be like, hey, I'm gonna put it in to waste some time. That was fun. I'm gonna go do something else now. But it's a game that clicked with me. It was a game that I had so much fun with. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was a game that only had a multiplayer. There was no single player campaign to speak of. There's a campaign mode with a story, but it's essentially multiplayer with like additional voices talking about a story, which basically goes in one ear and out the other because you're in the middle of a firefight. But I wouldn't even feel comfortable giving this award to somebody else and not recognizing Titanfall for the awesome things that it has done for me this year. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It was a really great game. It's a game that I still play. I played it yesterday. It's a really good game. You should play it too. Best multiplayer would have to go to Titanfall. So let's talk about the best studio. Without developers, we wouldn't even have video games. So we need to give recognition to these people. We need to thank them for giving us these awesome games this year. So here are the nominees for best studio. And the winner is Respawn Entertainment for Titanfall. For all the reasons that I just mentioned about Titanfall being best multiplayer game, how Respawn made a really in-depth game that had awesome balancing and just awesome controls and awesome gameplay that ate up hours of my life. But Respawn listens to the fans. It updates the game with free content. I fired up the game after months of not playing it and discovered that there were whole new game modes that I never even heard of. There was even a horde mode where you're just playing with other people and just fighting NPCs. It's something new. It's awesome. It's great. Then they add in decals and voices for your Titans. When the game launched, it had like 5 game modes and I think about like 10 or 12 multiplayer maps, and you could play the game and enjoy the hell out of it, which I did, but it did get repetitive and you're just like, all right, well, it's time to go do something new. Then you come back after a long break and you discover that there are a whole lot of new game modes and that there are some map packs that you can buy, which is honestly the only thing you need to pay for. Everything else was freely updated. I think Ubisoft did a really good job with Far Cry 4, but I think that they may have rehashed a little bit too much when it comes from bringing over what worked with Far Cry 3. They should have at least made the game feel a little bit more fresh. I mean, what they did was fantastic, but I mean, give me a little bit more that's new. I think Monolith Monolith Productions was a really close number 2 because they did such a fantastic job of creating this Nemesis system that I just would lose myself in. I just feel that once you've gone through all of Shadow of Mordor, as fantastic as it was, I've done it. Whereas Titanfall is still continuing to be updated with new stuff. You play the game and it's like, this is something I've never done before. Creating the rivalries with orcs, something I've done before. BioWare did a fantastic job with Dragon Age Inquisition, and I'm sure down the road we're going to see DLC, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. A point that we have gotten to with Titanfall. Titanfall has been given the chance to give it some life, to see what new content would look like. So we have seen what Respawn would do with the game. The game of Titanfall knew what it was, knew what fanbase to target, and that's all thanks to Respawn. Thank you, Respawn, for creating the awesome game that is Titanfall, and you guys are the best studio, in my opinion, of 2014. Now, this wouldn't be an award show if I didn't have a Game of the Year category. It's a category that needs no introduction, so here are the nominees for Game of the Year.
I distinctly remember saying, stop the bus. Yes, stop the bus. Not shoot the bus. I'm very particular with my words.
Giant whip is attacking me. Cisco's marketing is getting really aggressive.
This happened to me.
You are banished from death, cast adrift between the worlds of light and dark. Curse binds us together within the walls of Ardar.
If what you say is true, then how do we break this curse?
And the winner is Dragon Age Inquisition. Pretty sure everybody knew I was going to say that because I had 2 other videos that announced that Dragon Age Inquisition was going to be my Game of the Year. But I really didn't feel right if I didn't have Game of the Year as a category in an award video. But Dragon Age Inquisition was a game that had a really good story, really good characters in it, including the main character you play as, that essentially, because it's a role-playing game, is you. Had really good decision-making, and it had a massive open world. A massive open world that is filled with content and story on its own. It is a game dripping with content. It is massive zones, all filled with all this awesome stuff that you can do. The game that came really close to being Game of the Year was Shadow of Mordor, but the only reason why it didn't become Game of the Year is, while awesome as the Nemesis system was, I feel like the main story of the game wasn't at all very good. As for Talion was very formidable in the gameplay with the combat and everything, but I feel like his character was very flat. Not because Troy Baker did a bad job, I thought he did a good job of voicing the character, I just think that the writing was just a little bit off. So if the character was a little bit better and the story was a little bit better, I would have had no problem giving this game Game of the Year. As for the other 2 games on this list, Far Cry 4 and Sunset Overdrive. Far Cry 4 was, in my opinion, too much of the same with Far Cry 3. As good for what it is, it's just something that I think I've played before. At least Dragon Age kind of opened up a little bit and gave me a little bit something fresh and new with the gameplay. And then Sunset Overdrive, while very fun and very awesome and very technically sound and really no negatives to it, I just don't think that it hit on the same chord as the other games on this list. It comes in as a really solid 4th nomination compared to the other 3 games here, and it kind of does, in my opinion, deserve to at least be recognized. Dragon Age Inquisition had a really good in-depth story that was super engaging. The stakes were really high, higher than any other Dragon Age game that has come out. The decisions that you have to make were really hard-hitting decisions. I really wasn't a huge fan of the combat system, but I've never really been a huge fan of the combat system. I'm not saying it's a bad combat system, but when I play Dragon Age games, I'm like, I gotta deal with this combat system. Again, it's not bad, it's just not something that I'm really thrilled about. It's a fantastic game that was just really dripping with content. I'm still putting more time into it. I'm still continuing to play it. I wouldn't feel right if I didn't give it to Dragon Age Inquisition, which is your 2014 Game of the Year. And that'll conclude my award video for this year. But the whole reason why I wanted to make this video is because I put so much focus on the top 10 games of 2014, games that as a whole, this is how good that they are. But I feel like there were a lot of games that just deserved recognition. Even if it didn't win, the whole reason why I had nominees is because I feel like games deserve a mention. Anyway guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.